The ninth word.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. فسبحان الله حين تمسون وحين تصبحون وله الحمد في السماوات والأرض وعشيا وحين تظهرون.
In the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate. So glorify Allah when you reach the evening, and when you rise in the morning. For all praise is His in the heavens and on earth, and towards the end of the day when you have reached noon. Brother, you ask me concerning the wisdom in the specified times of the 5 daily prayers. I shall point out only one of the many instances of wisdom in the times. Yes, like each of the times of prayer marks the start of an important revolution, so also is each a mirror to divine disposal of power and to the universal divine bounties within that disposal. Thus, more glorification and extolling of the all-powerful One of glory have been ordered at those times, and more praise and thanks for all the innumerable bounties accumulated between each of the times, which is the meaning of the prescribed prayers. In order to understand a little this subtle and profound meaning, you should listen together with my own soul to the following 5 points. The first point, the meaning of the prayers, is offering of glorification, praise and thanks to Almighty Allah. That is to say, uttering
Subhanallah,
glory be to Allah, by word and action, before Allah's glory and sublimity, is to hallow and worship Him, and declaring
Allahu Akbar,
Allah is most great, through word and act, before His sheer perfection. It is to exalt and magnify Him, and saying
Alhamdulillah,
all praise be to Allah, with the heart, tongue and body. It is to offer thanks before His utter beauty, that is to say, glorification, exaltation and praise are like the seeds of the prayers. That is why these 3 things are present in every part of the prayers, in all the actions and words. It is also why these blessed words are each repeated 33 times after the prayers, in order to strengthen and reiterate the prayer's meaning. The meaning of the prayers is confirmed through these concise summaries. Second point, the meaning of worship is this, that the servant sees his own faults, impotence and poverty, and in the divine court prostrates in love and wonderment before dominical perfection, divine mercy, and the power of the eternally besought one. That is to say, just as the sovereignty of dominicality demands worship and obedience, so also does the holiness of dominicality require that the servant sees his faults through seeking forgiveness, and through his glorifications and declaring
Subhanallah,
glory be to Allah, proclaims that his sustainer is pure and free of all defects, and exalted above and far from the false ideas of the people of misguidance, and hallowed and exempt from all the faults in the universe. Also, the perfect power of dominicality requires that through understanding his own weakness and the impotence of other creatures, the servant proclaims
Allahu Akbar,
Allah is most great, in admiration and wonder before the majesty of the works of the eternally besought one's power, and bowing in deep humility seeks refuge in Him and places his trust in Him. Also, the infinite treasury of dominicality's mercy requires that the servant makes known his own need and the needs and poverty of all creatures through the tongue of entreaty and supplication, and proclaims his sustainer's bounties and gifts through thanks and laudation, and uttering
Alhamdulillah,
all praise be to Allah. That is to say, the words and actions of the prayers comprise these meanings, and have been laid down from the side of divinity. Third point, just as man is an example in miniature of the greater word and Surah Al-Fatiha, a shining example of the Quran of mighty stature, so are the prescribed prayers a comprehensive, luminous index of all the varieties of worship, and a sacred map pointing to all the shades of worship of all the classes of creatures. Fourth point, the second hand, minute hand, hour hand, and day hand of a clock, which tells the weeks, look to one another, are examples of one another, and follow one another. Similarly, the alternations of day and night, which are like the seconds of this world, a vast clock of Almighty Allah, and the years, which tell its minutes, and the stages of man's lifespan, which tell the hours, and the epochs of the world's lifespan, which tell the days, look to one another, are examples of one another, resemble one another, and recall one another. For example, the time of Fajr, the early morning, this time until sunrise, resembles and calls to mind the early spring, the moment of conception in the mother's womb, and the first of the 6 days of the creation of the heavens and earth. It recalls the divine acts present in them. The time of Zuhr, just past midday, this resembles and points to midsummer and the prime of youth, and the period of man's creation in the lifetime of the world, and calls to mind the manifestations of mercy and the abundant bounties they contain. The time of Asr, afternoon, this is like autumn and old age, and the times of the final prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, known as the era of bliss, and recalls the divine acts and favours of the all-merciful one present in them. The time of Maghrib, sunset, through recalling the departure of many creatures at the end of autumn, and man's death, and the destruction of the world at the commencement of resurrection. This time puts in mind the manifestations of divine glory and sublimity, and rouses man from his slumbers of heedlessness. The time of Isha, nightfall. As for this time, by calling to mind the world of darkness, veiling all the objects of the daytime world with a black shroud, and the winter hiding the face of the dead earth with its white cerement, and even the remaining works of departed men dying and passing beneath the veil of oblivion. And this world, the arena of examination, being shut up and closed down forever, it proclaims the awesome and mighty disposals of the all-glorious and compelling subduer. As for the night time, through putting in mind both the winter and the grave and the intermediate realm, it reminds man how needy is the human spirit for the most merciful one's mercy, and the tahajjud prayer informs him what a necessary light it is for the night of the grave and darkness of the intermediate realm. It warns him of this, and through recalling the infinite bounties of the true bestower, proclaims how deserving he is of praise and thanks. And the second morning calls to mind the morning of the resurrection. For sure, how reasonable and necessary and certain the morning of this night is. The morning of the resurrection and the spring following the intermediate realm are certain to the same degree. That is, just as each of these 5 times marks the start of an important revolution and recalls other great revolutions, so through the awesome daily disposals of the eternally besought one's power, each calls to mind the miracles of divine power and gifts of divine mercy of both every year and every age and every epoch, that is to say, the prescribed prayers, which are an innate duty and the basis of worship, and an incontestable debt, are most appropriate and fitting for these times.